So welcome to this week's Times Radio Frontline recap. I'm Philip Ingram. I currently present Frontline, but I'm a former senior British military intelligence officer and commentator on all matters geopolitics, defence, security, terrorism, and anything else that people ask me to do. Now, we've got some great videos for you this week. Of course, I'm going to turn around and say that you should watch the long version of all of them, but there's a couple of clips that I want to bring to your attention first and foremost. And the first clip is Donald Trump talking about his phone call that he had with Vladimir Putin at the beginning of this week.
Well, I want to thank everybody. We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made. It's a terrible situation going on over there. 5,000 young people every single week are being killed. So hopefully we did something. We also spoke to the heads of most of the European nations, and we're trying to get that whole thing wrapped up.
Now, the key bits in what Trump has said with regard to the phone call is, he re-emphasises the casualties that are there. He re-emphasises it's a terrible situation. He re-emphasises that he's made some progress with Vladimir Putin. But what we don't hear coming from Donald Trump is anything where he seems to be suggesting he's going to force Putin to make some difficult decisions. There were threats before the phone call that the United States had the ability to put major sanctions on Russia. Nothing concrete seems to have happened in that 2.5-hour phone call. It's good that they're talking, but the US president seems as if he's being played by Vladimir Putin. And looking at Putin and Putin's view of the conversation that I had with Donald Trump, and you can work that out yourself and see whether you think he's playing him. Just watch the body language. But let's have a look at Vladimir Putin talking about the phone call here.
Действительно, этот разговор состоялся, продолжался более 2 часов. Хочу отметить, что он был очень содержательным и весьма откровенным. И в целом, на мой взгляд, в этой связи весьма полезным. Прежде всего, я поблагодарил президента Соединенных Штатов за поддержку со стороны США возобновления прямых переговоров между Россией и Украиной по поводу возможного заключения мирного соглашения. По поводу возобновления переговоров, которые были прерваны украинской стороной, как известно, еще в 2022 году. Президент Соединенных Штатов высказал свою позицию по поводу прекращения боевых действий, перемирия, и со своей стороны отметил также, что и Россия выступает за мирное урегулирование украинского кризиса. Мы должны просто определить наиболее эффективные пути движения к миру. Договорились с президентом Соединенных Штатов о том, что Россия предложит и готова работать с украинской стороной над меморандумом по поводу возможного будущего мирного договора с определением ряда позиций, таких как, например, принципы урегулирования, сроки возможного заключения мирного соглашения и так далее, включая и возможное прекращение огня на определенное время в случае достижения соответствующих договоренностей. Контакты между участниками встречи и переговоров в Стамбуле, они возобновились, и это дает основание полагать, что мы в целом на правильном пути. Еще раз хочу подчеркнуть, что беседа была очень конструктивной, и я ее оцениваю высоко. Вопрос, конечно, в том, чтобы российская и украинская сторона проявили максимум стремления к миру и нашли бы те компромиссы, которые бы устроили все стороны. При этом хочу отметить, что в целом позиция России ясна. Главное для нас — устранить первопричины этого кризиса.
Now, Vladimir Putin goes on to turn around, and this is aimed at his domestic audience, emphasise that he's talked to President Trump. The conversation went on for a couple of hours. It was very informative. It was very frank. It was useful, he said. These aren't strong diplomatic words. These are words where Putin is suggesting out to the Russian people. That's the audience he's focusing these comments on. That he has got conversation going, he's got dialogue going with the new US president, and that he is an equal with Donald Trump. He turns around and says they support the resumption of direct negotiations. They want a ceasefire, a peace settlement, but not go into the grounds that there are there. And we know what's going to come next. Whenever Russia puts out its grounds, it's going to be wanting more and more and more, and they're going to be deliberately unacceptable to the Ukrainians. What Vladimir Putin is trying to do with this is to reel in Donald Trump to a point where he stops Donald Trump from taking more detailed action against the Russians and against Vladimir Putin, and to stop him from supporting Zelensky, because he keeps throwing out the hope carrot, hoping that something's going to come out of it. But he doesn't want to set himself up into a position where he gives anything to President Zelensky, because I think Vladimir Putin actually doesn't want the conflict to end at the moment. So I've got 3 videos from Frontline this week that I want to point you to. And as I said at the beginning, I think you should go and watch all of them because they are fantastic interviews. The first is with a good friend of Frontline, Sir William Browder, Bill Browder. And Bill is talking about why Vladimir Putin won't meet Zelensky. And in effect, Putin is scared of Zelensky. What Bill highlights is that Putin is not very good on a one-on-one basis. He's not very good at thinking on his feet. It has to be scripted. It has to be rehearsed. And he knows that Zelensky is good at thinking on his feet. And he's scared of Zelensky backing him into a corner. And Bill highlights how Zelensky, with him going to Turkey to the peace talks that Putin had said, let's go to Turkey and sit down and talk ceasefire and talk peace. Putin doesn't turn up. Zelensky turns up. Putin was never going to turn up. And as Bill highlights quite eloquently, this is in effect Vladimir Putin pulling out volume 2 or volume 3 of his excuse book to find out why he can't go there, because he's scared of Zelensky. He's scared of sitting down with them, and he's scared of being caught out. He can manipulate things when he's prepared. He can manipulate things from afar. He can't do it sitting around a table, especially when you've got the world's eyes watching him. And Sir William, Bill highlights this really quite clearly.
So, I mean, let's look at the chronology. Putin made an announcement saying that he's ready to negotiate with Ukraine. So then Trump leaned on Zelensky and said, I urge you to negotiate. And so Zelensky said, even though there's, we're not going to negotiate until there's a declared ceasefire. He decided to go anyways, and so he shows up in Istanbul, and lo and behold, Putin doesn't show up. And not only does he not show up, he sends a group of nobodies to this negotiation. I mean, it's just as plain as day that Putin has no interest in peace. That's the bottom line here, and everything else that happens is just in one way or another giving him more flexibility and more latitude on that position. But it's obvious that what needs to happen is Russia needs to declare an unconditional 30-day ceasefire, as Ukraine has, and then there should be real negotiations. And that's the only way that this will get solved. I seriously doubt whether that's going to happen. And I also seriously doubt whether, even if there were such negotiations, that Russia would negotiate in good faith, because they never have before.
And on these negotiations, it's been pretty clear now from the West, and especially from the White House, that they want Putin to do this in person. They want him to sit down with Zelensky to get to a peace deal here. Why do you think Putin is so afraid, seemingly, of face-to-face talks with Zelensky?
Well, because he doesn't want to be humiliated, and he would be the one getting humiliated if Zelensky shows up and said, I'm ready to do this, this, and this," and then it becomes clear that Putin's ready to do nothing, which is, by the way, the position that this group of nobodies presented in Istanbul. This group of nobodies showed up and said, "Our negotiating position is that Ukraine should withdraw from their own territory." Of course, they're not going to withdraw from their own territory. It's absurd.
And we're getting more details now of this phone call between President Trump and President Putin. As far as we can tell, the Russians Putin has not made any further concessions at all. How long can this go on where the US continues to push for a ceasefire and the Kremlin simply stonewalls? And what does it tell us? At what point will it become clear to people who have taken a softer line on the Kremlin, do you think, that there really is no ceasefire coming just around the corner?
The point would be like a year ago. It's obvious. You don't have to be some kind of political scientist to see what's going on here. Putin doesn't want. He's never altered his position 1 millimeter. His position is total surrender of Ukraine. And the only strange thing about this is that Donald Trump kept on repeating during his campaign that he was going to resolve this war in one day. And so he put his neck out, and now all of a sudden he's looking kind of stupid. And so he's trying to find ways of looking less so, but it's not working very well, and Putin is not giving him any opportunity.
So the next video I think you should watch, and again this is a fantastic one, is from a former US ambassador to Ukraine, Ambassador Herbst, and this was me chatting to him, and we had a good long chat talking through what's driving Donald Trump. And Ambassador Herbst is a Trump fan, but in this he criticizes him in many ways. He almost describes Trump as being out of his depth. But I quiz him as to why the Americans are using J.D. Vance, the Vice President, as well as Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, as well as Steve Witkoff, the Special Envoy. Now, Special Envoys are not unusual in US politics, but they'd usually support the Secretary of State. Here, he seems to be supporting directly Donald Trump. But J.D. Vance, Vice Presidents, don't traditionally get involved in geopolitical and foreign affairs. However, I asked Ambassador Herbst if he thought this could be an apprenticeship for J.D. Vance, setting him up potentially to be the next president by exposing him to all of the bigger issues. And Ambassador Herbst effectively agreed. So this is something to watch, I think, as we see the politics over the years of this Trump administration, how much Trump is going to allow Vance to go and take the lead on many things that Trump would be doing or other senior members of his cabinet would be doing. The other interesting thing is Ambassador Herbst criticizes some individuals within the US administration without actually naming them. He's very critical of people that are not necessarily in foreign affairs but have got dealings with other very large departments. I'll let you work out who those individuals are. Watch the whole thing. It's a fantastic interview.
I was impressed by the performance of Vice President Vance last week in two ways. First, regarding Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Vance said publicly that, referring to the unsuccessful Istanbul talks relating to the ceasefire, he said the Russians are demanding too much. So basically saying what's very clear, that Russia is the problem in getting a ceasefire. But he did actually something last week which demonstrated substantial growth and a real achievement at the same time, not relating to the war in Europe, but relating to the confrontation between India and Pakistan. At the start of it, he said, well, there's really no U.S. role in this, which of course is wrong. But then we learned that he and Secretary of State Rubio were the guys working the phones to get the ceasefire. So Vance made a serious contribution, not just to U.S. security with that, but to global security, and in a way that was directly flew in the face of his initial reaction to the conflict. which demonstrates leadership and growth, and it's welcome to see.
Do you think he's been deliberately put in this position by President Trump to give him an apprenticeship to set him up to potentially be the next president?
That's, I think, a reasonable analysis. Vance is obviously a smart man, but although not very well schooled in national security policy. But this is a great way to learn it. And I think that may well be the president's intention.
Who's got the lead in the US administration, apart from the president? Of course, he's got the lead, but in dealing with Putin, dealing with Russia, dealing with Ukraine, because we seem to get Witkoff going in to see Putin and getting involved. We've got JD Vance, and traditionally, and I may be getting this wrong as a Brit, not understanding US politics, but the US vice president didn't always seem to get involved in the wider geopolitics. That was left to the Secretary of State. We've got Marco Rubio coming in. And I remember looking at the video of the ambush of Zelensky in the Oval Office, if I describe it that way. And it was JD Vance that took the lead, but Marco Rubio sitting beside him on the sofa was looking very uncomfortable indeed. Who's leading, or is it all three just trying to advise the president who's leading himself?
Look, roughly speaking, there are two camps around the president regarding the Russian war in Ukraine. One camp recognizes, as the Russian national security strategy says, that the United States is considered by Russia to be its principal adversary. And that group understands that what Russia's doing in Ukraine is very dangerous for American interests in Europe and globally. Then there's another group which appears to be clueless about the threat posed by Russian national security policy to the United States and Russia's aggression in Ukraine and Russians' ambitions to go beyond Ukraine if they succeed in taking effective political control in Ukraine. And they are, for their whole variety of reasons, which we don't have time to go into right now, willing to allow Putin to take control of Ukraine. And they don't understand that this would be not just a major geopolitical defeat for the United States, but it would make Trump look like a truly failed national security president. And I think Trump sort of gets that last part, sort of gets it.
Do you think if that happened, Xi Jinping would turn around and go, that's a green light to take Taiwan by force?
Well, green light is a bit too strong, but it would give him much incentive to do so. Now, I think there's a senior official at the Pentagon who has made his reputation in the last 2 years claiming the only real threat we face is China, let Russia do what it wants in Eastern Europe. It's amazing that official, before he became an official, continued to utter that geopolitical naivete in the face of the fact that after he made that point, the leaders of Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea, who have far more stakes in this than that official, said publicly the best way to deter Xi from moving on Taiwan is to defeat Putin in Ukraine. And those three states people were absolutely right. And that's basic geopolitics.
And then the final interview I think that you should watch this week is someone who's new to Frontline, Orysia Lutsevich, who is the Deputy Director of Russia and Eurasia at Chatham House. This is the first time we sat down and talked to her. And what a lovely lady. What she doesn't know and understand about the political thinking, but tied in with that, it's the cultural thinking that pulls it all together, is not worth knowing. That Russian, Ukrainian, and then Eurasian piece gives her the perfect platform to be able to understand China's view in supporting Putin and what China is trying to get out of it. And the one thing that she emphasized very clearly was that China is doing the minimum it can with Vladimir Putin. She said that whenever Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin sat down, Putin was hoping to get a comprehensive deal, a comprehensive bilateral understanding and bilateral support from China. Xi Jinping was very clear and very careful not to do that and just to make the right noises that kept Putin contented. I wouldn't say happy, but contented. And then you keep Putin at arm's length so that what he wasn't doing was trying to instigate the wrath of the West. Because of course, China's biggest economic trading base is out in the West. It's not into Russia. But again, Orisia turns around and highlights how what Xi Jinping likes about what is going on is that it is taking political capital away from the West as the West is trying to deal with what's going on inside Ukraine. It's forcing the West and international leaders to look at something that isn't China, as China continues to slowly, very carefully, very deliberately manipulate its way around other parts of the world.
I'm sure Putin was quite disappointed after the May 9th meeting with Xi because there were no big deals. The Chinese are reluctant to invest big time in Russia. And it's interesting why. Either they think the market is overpriced or it's too risky in terms of what is the stability of Putin's own regime, or they decide that they can get what they need without major investment. There's no major investment of China in Russia. And what China is getting mainly is Russia is an instrument of weakening United States and Europe. Russia's invasion of Ukraine created contingency that neither United States nor Europe wanted to deal with. It focuses at least the attention of Europe now on how to contain Russian invasion. And that also that fundamentally opens China more open field in Asia Pacific, and also China is learning a lot about the future of war. Russians are providing Chinese a lot of intelligence on how Western weapons are performing. They're also testing a lot of drones that can later be used in other wars. So they get very valuable insights into new technological warfare.
Oh, there's no doubt that every side is, and every country around the world is using one side or the other to beta test a lot of its new military technology and bits and pieces. But exploring that Chinese-Russian relationship, do you think there's a danger that if Putin gets defeated, there's a danger that the Russian Federation could collapse and China would see that as an opportunity to get some historical territories back, or other interests to try and provide stability? Or am I speculating too far here?
It's a bold question, which I wish more people asked themselves. It's something that we should be thinking as a possible scenario. What is the impact of this war, this invasion on Russia itself? And I think that one way to put at it is that it's really losing a lot of people in the war. Its economic model is constrained, and right now it only basically is fueled by defense and military production. So influx of money to pay people, work 3-4 shifts at defense companies, and then all these compensations to dead and wounded soldiers in Ukraine. I think that China historically has a land dispute with Russia, with back Russian Empire. Chinese are eager to get access to water resources of Altai part, and I think they Russians in a way have a theory. In order to hold their empire together internally, they want to export entropy, which is chaos, abroad. And this is what they did with this war. Unfortunately, they didn't expect that these sanctions we talked about and Ukrainian resistance will bring back that entropy into Russia itself. And there are a lot of subterranean, signs that as resource pie shrinks, elites at the national level and subnational level, these republics, they're thinking hard how to preserve themselves. So this war is putting pressure. How this will play out is too early to say, and it will depend on the outcome of the war. Like you said, it will be one of the major factors about the future of Russia itself.
Do you think the Trump team might be realizing that, and what they're trying to do is balance off finding a solution without causing the collapse of the Russian Federation? Because actually, if the Russian Federation collapsed, that would make the breakup of Yugoslavia seem like a Sunday school party or something compared with the impact that it would have on the global stage, and might actually trigger us into a global conflict, especially if you get republics that have suddenly got control of old Russian nuclear weapons, nuclear capability.
Well, there is a big spectrum between weakening and collapse. And, when we are talking about collapse, there has to be a lot of factors in place for this to lead to this scenario. At this point, we are nowhere near there. And if this is the logic that is driven, then it's actually a Russian information operation to scare both Western Europe and United States into even thinking about defeating Russia. We often hear that somebody even worse than Putin could come, that you'd rather deal with this type of, KGB kleptocracy type of regime than with right-wing nationalist militants. So yes, they are abusing this narrative, accusing the West for their home audience that they want to actually partition Russia, or they want Russia to collapse in order to rally people around the flag. But again, we on the spectrum of achieving this probably still in the beginning journey of it.
So that's the recap for this week. I urge you to watch all of the interviews. I would do. And please, if you've got any comments, sign up for Times Radio membership. Put the comments below and we can address those, or if you have any questions, we can address those in our weekly question and answer session. I'm Philip Ingram. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.